How can we find God's presence in the midst of grief? That's the question we're going to be addressing today on Flourishment. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourishment is sponsored by Access More. Today, I have the honor of welcoming a multi-Emmy Award-winning producer, Steve Johnson. He's the executive director, executive producer, and co-founder of Five Stone Media. His producing career specialized both in live and taped events. He's managed multiple projects simultaneously, developed innovative program content concepts for clients like ESPN, Fox Networks, Turner Broadcasting, and others. But after he met with John Turnipseed around the campfire, a passion for telling transformational stories of redemption was formed, and Five Stone Media was born. Steve and his wife Jennifer have 4 grown children and 5 grandchildren, and he enjoys the world of aviation and chasing race cars. Boy, that must keep you in shape, Steve, if you're chasing race cars.
Well, I used to do that professionally a little bit in the race car world, but now I have grandsons that race cars too, so I still am around the racetrack. So yeah, it's great exercise, especially when they're going fast, right?
Yes, those little grandchildren could go pretty fast too. You have to
They
catch
do.
them before they get
Yeah.
away from you.
And they're fearless on top of that.
Well, you have been chasing transformational stories even more so, and we're going to talk about the way that you've chased grief stories, but not in the way that keeps us in despair. A grief story that can help you experience God's presence and actually find hope, which is an interesting concept. And I can't wait to dive into this. What made you zero in on grief stories with all the wide experience that you've had in media and film and television production? Why this topic?
Well, it started with the story of this gentleman you named, John Turnipseed, who happened to be at a men's conference I was at about 15 years ago. And John is a former gang leader and pimp and drug dealer, and got up and told his transformational story around the campfire. And so myself, with a background in video and television producing, I appreciate a good story. But John said, he goes, I have 30 members of my family in prison, and now I'm the director of the Center for Fathering at this organization in Minneapolis. And I just was so curious how somebody could rise above that and have a family that's that kind of messed up. So I reached out to John. I go, I think there's some guys that would like to do a short video, just kind of help you tell your story as you go around and speak. And so we formed Five Stone Media with myself and 4 other guys, simply to give John this video, and we kept our day jobs, and then we were going to move on with our lives. And God had other plans for us. So the short story is the one film turned out to be 3 films and a book. And then we created, with other stories like John Turnipseed's, we created a video series that we take into prisons and we take into jails. It's called Lifeblood. Out of that, we realized that the idea of sharing people's experiences really resonates. We could go into prison with a Bible study, but it's not the same as somebody else talking about their transformation that's been in their shoes, right? So at that time, we had a group of mental health professionals that came to us and said, look, at the way you guys tell stories, could you possibly tell stories of trauma to offer hope and healing for the church? And we said, well, I think we could do that, but I don't know any therapists. I don't, if we're gonna get into the trauma field, we should probably at least be well versed in that. And they said, look, we'll bring a team of mental health professionals to you that each have a team of stories, of survivor stories that want to be told. And so in 2018, Tina, we started collecting these stories, and the first series of that collection was called The Worst Loss, and it's for sudden loss. A lot of parents talking about the loss of a child, suicide, overdose, so that their stories could help other parents that are going through that as well. And we just kept collecting stories. And then the pandemic hit, and all of our prison work stopped because we were locked out, they were locked in. And so we decided to build what we call life support resources with the stories that we had already collected, and just put it on a website that maybe this could help people. Okay. And so we just kept collecting these stories all through the pandemic. You know, we would interview people in churches. They were masked up until they just, were doing the interview. And we, at the end of the day, we've collected about 150 stories. And so a publisher came to us about a year ago, who had published a John Turnipseed book. And he goes, look, you have all these stories. Could you, with those stories, offer hope and healing for people, and with the subject of grief and loss? And so we started putting that together. So 150 stories, how do you narrow that down to 30 stories? So we kind of broke it into sections on different areas of grief and loss. And it was quite a process for us to narrow that down. But that's what, again, this is the very short version of how all of this happened. But that's how we ended up with a devotional that is called God is Always With You, 31 Days of Hope and Healing for Grief and Loss.
So you went from television and film and producing visual content to producing a book. What was that transition like? That is a very difficult shift to make. It's a completely different media to work in. Was that something that you questioned and you wondered, well, is God really in this? This publisher said we're supposed to do it. Am I supposed to do it? Or did you immediately know it was for you?
No, I didn't. We had published John Turnipseed's autobiography with his publisher. We had just kind of accidentally met. And I let them handle everything. I don't know anything about writing books or publishing, so they found a writer for it, and that was about 6 years ago or so. Then he came back to us, 2 years ago and said, "You're collecting these stories. Are you interested in coming out with a devotional?" And my first answer was no, and that was the end of our lunch. I just said, I don't feel this is the right time to do something like that. I certainly don't feel equipped to do anything like this. And along the way, I had been joined in our ministry by a writing partner whose name is Lee Bailey Sealer, terrific writer. So I do a lot of the video producing. He does a lot of the curriculum writing. And the publisher came back to us a year ago and said, now you have all of these stories, please, could you do this? And we decided to tackle this, and knowing that a publisher has a lot of tools that we don't have. And so it's a matter of us of just, kind of compiling the stories. We knew they would do the editing. We didn't even know if they would like what we put together. And so, I mean, if you've written books, you know the trauma of that, right? You go like, is anybody even care about this? And so I think, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, Lee and I holed up at a friend's farmhouse for several days and put all this together on a whiteboard and came out with this. And so it's a hard process, especially like you said, I'm video based, video and film production and television production, but it's still telling stories. So the 4 words we live by with our organization are story, hope, healing, and change. And that kind of fits video and writing.
Well, we're talking today with founder of Five Stone Media, and he is an accomplished person in video and film. And now he has a new book that is just coming out, and we're very excited to feature that. Can you tell people where they can find you and get in touch with you and look at all of the wonderful media that you have to offer, including your new book?
Yeah, the 2 places, fivestonemedia.com. Just spell out fivestonemedia.com, has a link to the book and has a link to most of what we've done. And then we've created what's called lifesupportresources.org. So that's our trauma-based stories. And it's more than just curriculums on mental health and sudden loss, but it's it's tools from all different categories that people can watch a video with somebody, a friend that might be going through a depression, and say, hey, listen to this person's story and let's just talk about it afterwards. We want, Tina, the body of Christ to be better equipped to come alongside each other, because we're finding out that pastors are way overwhelmed right now with a lot of different things. Mental health professionals have people, you can't get in to see one for months right now. So that leaves a gap in the middle. So is it up to the body of Christ now? And so that's, this book is not just one to buy for you to read, but it's one to give away as a gift for somebody who might be going through that themselves. By the way, I just want to mention all of our video resources are free. Okay. We don't charge for any of that. All you have to do is register on the site and you can have access to any of the stories that we have there.
I so appreciate the ministry that you have to people who desperately need hope, and they need someone to come alongside them and hear them and provide a lifeline. And that sounds like what you are really offering is just a connection to hope, a connection to tools, a connection to resources, a connection to other people's stories. And there's a healing power in the story of someone who's walked just a mile further than you and has still survived this grief, isn't there?
Yeah, story is powerful. And we all have a story. You could stop anybody on the street, and if you spend enough time with them, they have a story. And I never get tired of hearing people's stories. I just can't get enough of it.
Well, I hope that all of you listening have enjoyed this conversation with a curator and a publisher of stories in video and book format, Steve Johnson. I hope that you'll check out his resources and avail yourself of those and get a copy of God is Always With You. And of course, I also hope that you come back for the next episode of Flourishment.